Hello and welcome. Today we want to talk about high-level layout composition. This is part 1 of a multiplayer level design direction series. This first series is loosely following my older, better-known article, Ben's Small Bible of Realistic Multiplayer Level Design, based on my experience working on the Quake 3 mod Navy SEALs Covered Operations. That mod was my first bigger release project and the foundation for my future career, and kinda my personal start of a more abstract design thinking. Now, for that reason, this project will always have a special spot in my heart. However, the article's title was still quite a mouthful, and it was so long and specific simply out of fear I could write something wrong about other level design styles. Remember, at that time, like more than 10 years ago, I was still quite young and quite green about that whole thing. The game industry can be quite a scary beast if you're young, fresh, and yeah, you know what I mean. Now, however, I'm far less scared. Plus, even though I've published the article like a decade ago, I still meet people who remember it and who were influenced by what I wrote. And to be honest, that feels good. But more important, those level designers didn't just create specifically realistic multiplayer maps, but all kinds of styles and genres, ranging from sci-fi to fantasy to arcade or even single player. So in this spirit, I want to reinterpret the article, broaden the topic, and add all my additional years of game development and level design direction. This first part is, as already mentioned, about high-level layout composition. Basically, it is about the abstract fundamental base of your level and how to create them. In my old article, I refer to it as the strategic plan. Now, the easiest way to understand what I mean is to compare them to the composition of paintings. It is the underlying placement and arrangement of visual elements. So ultimately in paintings, they can help to guide the viewer's eyes. And well, in levels, the composition guides the players. Now you would be surprised how simple most basic layouts are once you analyze them a bit. And I'm not talking here about mid-level design or details like cover placement, small shortcuts, curve angles, and so on. I'm really just talking about the main player lanes, aka the high level. They are your layout bread and butter, and they must be executed and planned perfectly, since once again, they are your foundation of your entire level. Otherwise, way too late and way too expensive to change, your level appreciation crumbles like a house of cards. Those high-level layouts often go back to basic geometrical forms and shapes. And at that stage, there isn't any focus yet on balance, path lengths, and so on. Just focus on the base idea or form. Just picture all the possible paths of the player as simple lines and you will begin to see a basic layout. However, at that stage, really try to hold yourself back to go in details, timing, and so on. Really, just draw the main lanes and keep it simple. Too many designers go way too complex early on and confuse themselves. Trust me, I've seen that. And well, I want to believe you don't have to be a nerd like me to see a certain beauty in simplicity. Let's assume we have two teams and they want to meet, to do whatever in the map. But just a straight line is boring, so they want choices. When do they want choices? Early on, like when they spawn. But they also want to have at least one option in between to change their mind or to help their friends on different paths. And I bet at that point, everyone recognizes this layout. Or you should. Alright, but how does game elements like spawn points or main objectives affect now your layout? Well, obviously they should be part of your planning early on. Especially asymmetrical objectives like bomb defusal compared to symmetrical layouts for capture the flag maps require a different approach. However, the thinking is similar. What do the teams want at the start or when they spawn? Where should they meet? And what choices do they want in between? At that stage, role-play your level as a player and or as a team. What would you or they do? What would the rectal thinker players do if they want to ruin your level? What are all the wrong things the minimal efficient players could do? That is important to do early on and at each planning step, and it starts here. Do you like that you only have 1 or 2 options here? Is it cool to run in a dead end? Isn't that path too long without any other options? Is it a good idea to have such a short connection between the team spaces? Questions like that must be answered and resolved now. Again, now. Those harsh questions to yourselves are cheap later on. If you ignore them, you might hate yourself. I just have to say something here quickly. Trying to make a level for all kind of game mode with very different demanding layout restrictions is like making a 2-seat sport car for the whole 6-member family with off-road capability plus swimming pool, but keep it small like a scooter. The fact that it won't be a beauty or any soul is the least of your problems at that point, just saying. I met enough designers and directors who thought it is possible, or they thought it's a design challenge and they're destined to solve it once for all. Yeah. At the end, a few were lucky to actually ship their product, and that's where it ended, but certainly not at the award show or how they dreamed it would end. Okay, just to be fair, you can make a map which is great for one game mode and maybe a few similar ones, like similar symmetrical ones, asymmetrical ones, arena-like one, and so on. And ideally your map is rather open with a good core and has a direction like Strike at Karkan for Battlefield 2 or 3. But mixing completely different game modes which require different flow and layout and just cramp it in because someone thinks that idea increases the value of your level. Anyhow, we're getting off topic. Alright, the difference between a good and a bad layout at that stage is the right number of primary options at the right time and or place, which you give to the player, plus the high-level flow. If the player has no options, then he obviously gets bored rapidly, if not even insulted intellectually. Minor special maps like sniper test maps and so on, we don't talk about all the niche ones now. If the player has too many options, then they most likely confuse him, plus it takes him way longer to learn the map. And to be honest, often too many options are unnecessary. Keep it effing simple. Sure, more options means often more fun, but it has limits as long as we talk about common games here. But it isn't just about the number of options, it is also about the frequency of options. Too long, time-wise, with no option is bad. But a high-speed section doesn't need many options because, well, you travel with high speed. And the opposite obviously is the case for slower sections. I mentioned the right place for options. As an example, the players don't need options again right after the initial options after they spawn. I mean, it confuses me saying it. But instead, they need more options again in the areas where they most likely fight. And yes, that is easier to say for round-based games, but even games which have continuous spawning have main battle spaces in areas which are rather for traveling or navigation. Keep that contrast in mind. Finally, let's also not forget the rhythm of options. If, for example, every 50 meters you have 2 hallways going left and right, then the whole map feels way too constructed, too artificial and boring. Because, well, it's the same everywhere. So taking the right frequency and rhythm in consideration of game objectives and spawns are the fundamental keys here. It is a bit like creating German industrial techno songs, but let's not drift off again. But quickly before we end this part, even though I'm primarily talking here about multiplayer, the whole concept can also be applied for certain single-player games. Especially sandbox, open-world sections and arena-style maps against AI can easily be designed in similar fashion. And creating such maps is the bulk of my actual recent experience. For example, we, or rather the level designer I worked with, used a very similar approach to design the main cave in which you fight the Great Scar Bear in Far Cry Primal. Or how I lay out the sandbox areas of my Crysis 1 maps. So a kind of boss fight arena on a high level isn't that much different from a deathmatch map. Well, obviously depends on the boss, but you kind of get the point. So I hope this little video was a bit informative and or entertaining. I hope to see you next time for more continuous multiplayer level design thoughts.